For a guy that does this whole talk on dating and relationships and shit, the kind of contents that I have today, I'm not gonna lie, they almost feel like content gold for me to a certain degree. Although the best part about it isn't just that, it's just that there's other stories that I have that are completely left field from that are also particularly interesting to a degree. But I will kind of get to those in a second because that is supposed to come in as the episode goes along. But for now, I'm going to start things off with a particularly interesting but slightly wild story. Now, a former US intelligence agent known as David Grush has confirmed under oath that aliens exist. I kid you the fuck not. The guy has actually confirmed it. We have extraterrestrials. We have aliens. The only question now that I have to ask at this point is, if we knew that the aliens existed, why the fuck were we sending nudes again? Okay, maybe I'm one of the few people that either knows or knew or has been reading on or had pretty much covered the story. I think it was either last year or 2021 when NASA decided to send nudes into space so that they can try and reach out to alien life for some sort of communication. Like, they actually did this thing where they went and they drew like a pixelated diagram, or they did a pixelated diagram with a naked man and a naked woman, and they sent them into deep space so that, if there were any aliens, they'd probably find what humans are supposed to look like and shit. And considering that they sent that out there, considering that they did that, knowing full well that there were aliens, like, couldn't they have sent something that's a little bit more representative of humanity, or at least send, some of the best of humanity? Like, send a 13-inch dick pic. Shit like that. Stuff that would make them look and be like, oh my goodness, these people clearly have very, very great reproductive capabilities and shit like that. Like, couldn't they send something nicer looking? Like, I wouldn't mind if they sent a photo of Johnny Sins in like a lab coat or some shit, so that these guys can know if they were to come to Earth, there's at least X videos and there's some good shit out there. Like, they could have sent some better shit as opposed to the nudes that they sent. Of course, they spoke about space, blah, blah, and, the speed of internet, blah, blah. But still, like, I feel like there's better ways to communicate with aliens than just sending nudes. But let me just read the caption on exactly what happened with the whole, the confirmation of aliens. So it says, and I quote, "Former U.S. intelligence agent David Grush testified under oath during the congressional UFO hearing confirming alien existence through UFO sightings and recovery of non-human aircraft with biological remains. During his testimony, Grush also revealed that the U.S. government's possession of off-world non-human bodies. He mentioned colleagues injured by UAP activity and federal government involvement, even disclosing crashed crafts with non-human biological pilots. Grush's astonishing revelations shed light on extraterrestrial encounters, leaving us questioning the extent of the government's knowledge." End quote. Okay, now, granted, after reading this and knowing that, the US government, or at least US intelligence, knew about this and they've kept it covered up for years, I honestly feel as though probably they actually sent those nudes there because they actually decided to send the nudes, and these guys are looking for some alien action. Because honestly, if you've had the sightings, if you have the UFOs, you clearly have proof that there is a couple of other beings that are out there in the galaxy, in the far, far beyond, that are clearly trying to come to Earth. So, further substantiating my point, NASA shouldn't have sent the nudes. They should have just sent a photo of Johnny Sins. That shit would have worked out perfectly. Although, then again, what do I know about talking to aliens and shit? Maybe I don't understand shit. I just know how to talk to humans, and I usually do it through this podcast, which I usually like to start by saying, welcome to Breakdown on West Side, your number one breakdown podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who wonders what an alien's vagina is like. I bet it has an opening, and instead of a boner, there's 2 fingers that just pull the dick in. That would be wild as shit though, right? He's a man who likes his women the same exact way he likes his yogurt. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This show is Tweet Street, or at least it used to be Tweet Street. Apparently, Twitter's name has now changed, so I don't know if I'm gonna change the name of the show, but the premise is still pretty much the same. I go into Twitter, I go looking at tweets, trying to pick up some of the things that people say out here, and I break them down and try and see if we can pull off a couple of lessons here and there that should at least help us in life, or at least should be particularly good for us to discuss as a people. Now, the drill, unlike the name, will not be changing. It is still pretty much the same exact way you can reach out and contribute to the making of these episodes on Friday. Is still pretty much the same, still pretty simple, almost sounds like a song, and it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal Twitter handle, and I will take it from there and handle it accordingly. On Facebook and on IG, you can hit me up on @Breaktime on Westside on Facebook or on IG. The DMs are always open, and I will take it from there and I will handle it accordingly. Now, I have a couple of tweets that I want to discuss, but they're more of cases because it's not just one individual tweet. For some, it's conversations. For some, it's a question that's been answered by someone. But before I get into any of that, because it's a particularly new and interesting way I want to try and handle things, I want us to talk about Somalia for a little bit. Now, for those of y'all that don't particularly familiarize yourself with Somalia beyond what it is that you see in the news, which is, Al-Shabaab killings and wars in Mogadishu and shit, Somalia is actually a particularly interesting country. It's still running pretty well, they still do a bunch of different things, and they attend athletic events as well. It's just that the very recent one that they had, which was, if I'm not wrong, it should be the FISU World University Games in China, their approach to attending an athletic competition was a little bit less than what you'd expect to be, how would we call it, athletic, because apparently in the 100-meter women's sprint, of all the people they could have decided to go for it, it ended up being some chick with a belly who could barely run. So she ended up running behind everyone else, and I'm fortunate enough that I have the video. If you ever want to just come and ask me for it, @Breaktime on Westside or @BagakaTheD. And to be very honest, it was a little bit embarrassing because at the same exact event, there was actually a 1500 meters race, and one of the people that they had there actually finished 4th. Like, when you kind of think about it, with one of them, they were trying to run shit, and then with the other one, they were busy trying to run with whatever shit they got. And to make matters worse, because some people actually came out and they were like, whatever the hell it is that this babe did in the 100-meter sprint was BS, they actually went ahead and did a little bit of research, and apparently, this lady who happened to compete in the 100-meter women's sprint with a belly and all is actually the minister's niece. Like, I kid you the fuck not. It was actually the minister's niece. Now, normally for us here in Kenya, because we tend to do more or less the same shit, we usually send the politicians or the politician's kid, but it's usually so that they can go and watch the games, not to go and participate. So to see that the minister's niece, who does not look like she has done that much running for a day in her life, all of a sudden go for a 100-meter sprint race expecting to win was a little bit wild. Like, let me try and give you guys a little bit of context from the video that I'm watching. This woman, from the wide-angle camera, right after the start line when the gun goes off and everyone's busy started running and everything, she gets left by the major wide-angle camera, like the one with the aerial view. She gets left, everyone else runs, finishes, then like 20-30 seconds later, okay, maybe around 15 seconds later, is now shown to appear to be crossing the finish line at that point. Like, shit was actually that bad. And, the problem with it wasn't just the fact that she decided to do it and it was like a nepotism case and all. I think another particularly important part of this story was the fact that people were clowning on her online for the fact that she was looking unfit and she had a belly. Now, of course, there's people that are always ready to run towards the whole talk of, this is fat phobia, having a belly doesn't make you unfit, blah, blah, blah. And, it sort of became this thing where some people were like, why are you judging her for having a belly? Yes, you can call her unfit, but don't say that the belly is a bad thing, because you can have a belly and still be a fit, healthy human being. And after reading a bunch of these comments and after considering the many, many different things that people in the world have done, all in the name of inclusivity, I honestly think that people that were laughing and ridiculing her for having a belly and going for the Olympic Games was totally wrong. that's not in the line of inclusion. Because when you think about it, if you have a bunch of women who used to be men before competing in women's sports, and y'all are saying that it's okay to do that and they should be allowed to compete as women, then we should allow women that had the opportunity to become skinny or have an opportunity to become skinny through natural and constructive surgery type means to also have the opportunity to go and compete in races that have people who have properly chiseled muscles and, properly defined abs and are at the utmost top level of athletic performance because of the spirit of inclusivity. Because at the end of the day, it's not like fat people can't compete in sports. And I think telling other people that, you shouldn't be competing if you have a belly and shit and because you're fat is probably wrong. Sumo wrestlers' lives matter. So honestly speaking, out of all of that, I do feel like, was it a case of fat phobia? Probably not, probably yes. But at the end of the day, I think, besides the whole nepotism side, I think it was perfectly okay that she competed. Now she knows exactly what it's like to be a fat person trying to compete against people who are at the peak of their physical performance and aren't holding back. Because at least at the end of it, she now gets to decide whether she wants to continue running or whether she's just gonna stick to running her mouth. Although, then again, that was probably a low blow and very uncalled for, but I do have tweets to get into, so I'm gonna leave it at that and move it on. So, on to our very first case study of tweets. Now, some time ago last month, I was looking at a tweet where some guy was saying that ladies be missing out on a good man because he's broke. Now, a lady came through and decided to comment on that and said, what exactly am I missing out on then? Another lady hops onto that and adds on and says, how is he a good man if he's broke? And while those two ladies were busy talking, of course, another lady came out, decided to reply and said, this is the mentality that makes black men go and find a white woman when he do get money. Now, after that, another man comes through, says, to some women, you're automatically a good person if you have money, not knowing that some men are very poor to the extent that they have nothing except money. Of course, now this entire conversation on Twitter kind of went on and on and on, but essentially the underlying question was, are you as a broke person capable of being a good person? Or to put it plainly, is a broke man a good man? Or to put it another way, if you are a broke man, can you be considered a good man? And to be quite honest, it's a little bit hard to answer that question because this is probably the clearest definition of an apples to oranges comparison, because being broke or being rich versus being good or being bad is so far apart, because you can be one or the other without necessarily being a part of one or a part of the other. Like, you can be a good man and you're rich, and you can be a good man and you're broke. You can be a broke man and you're bad, and you can be a rich man and you're still bad. Like, it's actually very hard to kind of decipher this kind of question into a yes or a no, because when you kind of think about it, to a certain degree, someone can argue that a broke man isn't a good man. You can talk about how a broke man is one who's mean. You can talk about the fact that they might be lazy, which is why they're not working hard and making more money. You can bring it up that way, but at the same time, you can say that a rich man is a bad man because he probably had to screw someone over, or he's profiting off of someone's problems or something of the sort. And at the end of the day, you can argue that either side is a good or a bad man. You know, a rich man can be a good man because the guy put in the work and he was smart about shit, and he used his wisdom and talents to, make himself a bunch of money, which is something that is preached in the Bible and probably even the Quran. So to kind of think about it into, can a rich man be broke, or is a good man broke or rich, is a bit misleading, to say the least, because at the end of the day, I think it just comes down to the kind of person, not necessarily how much money they have. And it probably does seem like I've belabored this point a little bit, but considering that there's people that believe that you're not a good man if you're broke, I think someone needs to at least be bold enough to give that distinction, because I can get how some people can talk about how, how can a broke man be good if he's broke and shit? Because on one end, you can argue that you don't know the kind of man that you're with when he's broke because he doesn't have means, because you won't really know who a real man is unless you give him means. So essentially, he can be good or bad at that point. Then once he gets a bunch of money, then he can automatically do a full-on 180 in terms of who they are. So I'd probably argue that for you to know whether they are good or bad, at least wait for them to have money, or, see how they treat you or the people around them, or just how they are as people when they have that money. Because at least then you'll know for sure whether they're a good man or a bad man. Because it's kind of like what Jordan Peterson usually says, where he's like, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Because you can't really say, for example, that a guy that doesn't attract women or doesn't have women who are attracted to him won't cheat on you, because you haven't seen him around a lot of women to actually know for sure. You'd have to look at the guy that has multiple women or can attract multiple women to sort of see whether this is someone who'll be able to entertain side pussy, or if the guy is going to be faithful or prefers to stick to just one. Because at the end of the day, you can't really know for sure up until you've actually been tried and tested with that particular challenge. Although that's just me, so I can't say for sure if that's gonna be the same for everyone else, but I am going to move it on to our very next tweet case of this episode, and it was actually revolving around a different question. And it was a guy who had asked, and I quote, "Ladies, what scares you about marriage?" And the answer that I saw that came directly afterwards was, marrying someone who settled for me because they couldn't get what they truly wanted. And to be quite honest, don't get me wrong, I don't think that this is, something to not fear. I think it does kind of make sense to a degree, but I tend to think that there's bigger issues to worry about than this. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this isn't bad, it's just there's other things to worry about. If your married husband is going to continue acting like a fully single man after he's married to you, if the guy is gonna still act the same or still gonna treat you the same after 5, 6, 10, 20 years, when you start getting old and wrinkly, whether he'll start chasing on younger birds and shit. You tend to think that there's other fears besides just the fact that he settled for you. Because at the end of the day, settling is one thing, and just because you're not the woman that he dreamed of doesn't mean that you're still a bad choice. At the end of the day, I don't think we're always going to be the person that the other person dreamed of, but we just have to be comfortable with the fact that if they chose to be with us and they end up being faithful enough, that at the end of the day, they made that choice and you were it, and in some ways, you were the best choice that was available at that time. So take the best part, leave the choice part, and move the fuck on. I tend to think that one's a hell of a lot easier to do. I just don't get why it is that some people would actually think back and they're like, I honestly don't know if he really, really wanted to be with me or someone else was what he wanted, but it really, really scares me to think that, he settled for me. If anything, you're the person that won. You may not have been the prize, but you were the chosen winner, either way. And hey, in this case, much as I hate using this terminology, a win's a win. Take your win and move the fuck on. As long as the guy treats you great and he loves you to death, even though you aren't the dream person that he wanted, take the win and move the fuck on, Because at the end of the day, we niggas know that the woman that we're with isn't always going to be the one that we dreamed of being with. At the end of the day, we just went for the best option that was available at that time, and we usually just hope that that best option was actually a great option at the end of it all. But then again, what do I know about marriage? I'm not married and I'm not trying to get married right now, so I am going to leave it at that and move things on to our very final case of this episode. And this one was actually just a simple tweet, but I feel like it is something that needs to be discussed. So the guy says, and I quote, "Divorce cases are the worst. Today in court, the magistrate asked the man whether he opposed the petition by his wife who claimed he couldn't satisfy her in bed, and the hesitation in his voice as he accepted the petition's furtherance was heartbreaking because you could still feel he loved her and that the divorce wasn't his wish. Marriage is a scam. End quote. Now, if there's one thing that I think I've spoken against for a particularly long time, whether it's me, being a little bit more on the red pill side, whether it's me tossing banter on babes and shit, if there's one thing that I've sort of spoken against, it's the whole idea that marriage is a scam. Have I said that it's become very debatable nowadays and there's questionable reasons for it and people go in with the wrong expectations or using the wrong criteria? Yes, I say all of that. But do I conclude that marriage is a scam? No. Because maybe the conditions under which I've been raised have been particularly good and, I've seen particularly great marriages around me, like work and flourish and shit. But even with the louder stories out here, with the multiple divorces, with the people cheating, and with all the wild shit that I hear and see regarding marriages, I still see particularly big hopes for it. Or at least, I'm still pretty optimistic about the idea of marriage. Now, don't get me wrong, I probably should have even started by saying this, but conjugal rights, I think, is probably one of the most painful ways that you can get divorced with someone. More so, your own wife coming out in court saying that you cannot satisfy her in bed. I feel like that's one of the few things that is the easiest to change in terms of issues in a marriage, because you can literally watch Kama Sutra videos. You guys can, communicate about what it is that you want. Or if it really comes to it, or, if you guys want the more professional side of it, go and talk to a sex therapist like Maurice Madeka, and learn shit. Because at the end of the day, if you're dumping someone, or should I say, if you're divorcing someone because they cannot satisfy you in bed, I think it's particularly painful to the other person, because on one end, there's the ego killer of being told that you can't satisfy me in bed. Then on the other end, there's the reputational damage when a bunch of other people in that courtroom are hearing that you have particularly shit dick game. At least according to your wife, or soon to be ex-wife at that point. Because now at that point, you don't even know how you're going to explain it to your people. You don't know how you're going to explain it to your friends. Because do you talk about irreconcilable differences? Do you talk about, one person wanted kids and the other one didn't? Or will you just come up with some other generalized lie around it just for your wife to come back and be like, nah, I dumped him because he had pathetic dick? Whichever way you look at it, it just comes back to bite the dude, and it just looks bad on all fronts. And I don't want to make too many assumptions, but if you hear a woman doing that, I'm not gonna lie, it just kind of sounds like the woman is spiteful at dude. It's not like the guy cheated, it's not like the guy has been bad, it's not like the guy hasn't provided. No, he just doesn't know how to penetrate. So out of the 3-4 P's that a man is supposed to have, he's failing at one of them, and thus he should be dropped. It sounds a little bit spiteful to me, to be honest, but at the end of the day, hey, maybe they did have irreconcilable differences. Maybe dude couldn't perform, or maybe he wasn't willing enough to communicate so that they can learn how to give each other sufficient pleasure and all. But now taking this entire situation and then concluding that marriage is a scam because of it is probably jumping the gun. I don't think that every woman or most women are going to dump you because you have pathetic dick game. But the one thing that I always do stress is you all need to communicate. Out of what makes a good relationship, or at least a good long-lasting relationship, trust and communication are the most paramount things there. And you can speculate that, one person did communicate or both of them couldn't communicate well to each other, but concluding that marriage is bad from that is almost like concluding that eating beef is a bad thing because you've been listening to a couple of vegans and people who have allergies to meat. It might have been bad for them, but it doesn't particularly make it bad for you. And hell, maybe they might have tried it before and maybe it didn't work. Probably they just went with the wrong person, or at least they went into the wrong environment with the wrong ideas. But then again, I might be wrong about this shit, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On Twitter, it is at Bagaka the D. On Facebook and on IG, it is at Breaktime on Westside. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.